All right. So example 2, it's another one. Solve a quadratic equation by completing the square when a equals 1. Okay, so you don't see anything other than 1 in front of the x squared. That's going to be a little simpler than one that would have a number in front of the x squared. Okay, so we're going to solve this by completing the square. And first of all, it asks us, can you solve this equation by factoring? And if we wanted to try to solve it by factoring, we would just add 10x to both sides. Okay, and see if we could find two numbers that add to give us 10 and multiply to give us negative 21. Okay, now negative 21 doesn't have that many factors. There's 1 in 21, 1 in negative 21, or negative 1 in 21, and then there's 3 in negative 7, or negative 3 in 7. And so there are no numbers that could go in there. Okay, so we can't solve this one by factoring. And so what that means, basically, we can predict that when we solve it by completing the square, we're not going to end up with whole numbers, okay? Because that would indicate that it is something that we could solve by factoring. Okay, so remember when we complete the square, that was actually a good first step. Okay, when we complete the square to solve an equation, we put the constant term on one side, and we keep the x squared and the x term on the other side. Okay, so I'm going to add 21 to both sides now. Okay. Let's erase this, it's kind of in the way. And we can complete the square. So we take this coefficient of the x, divide it in half, then we get 5, and we square that 5. Okay. And because we added 25 to one side, we're going to add 25 to the other. This can now be rewritten. Take that 5, and it's positive, right, because we're looking at this sign. And so it's x plus 5 squared equals 46. Okay. So yeah, I can see now that I'm not going to have a nice round number, right? Because when I take the square root of both sides, and I'll take plus or minus on the one side, okay? Yeah, 46 isn't a perfect square. Okay, so I just have to leave this as plus or minus root 46. Okay, if you want to know if you can simplify that, you can look at the squares, perfect squares that are smaller than 46. Okay, 4 doesn't go in, 9 doesn't go in, 16 doesn't go into that. 25 doesn't go into that, and 36. Okay, those are the only perfect squares that are smaller than that. Okay, so I'm going to end up with x being equal to negative 5, because I'm going to add negative 5 to both sides. Okay, and plus or minus the square root of 46. Okay, so it asks us to express our answers to the nearest tenth. All right, the square root of 46 is 6.8. Okay, so we're looking at x equals negative 5 plus 6.8, and x equals negative 5 minus 6.8. Okay, so x equals 1.8, and x equals negative 11.8. Okay, so fairly obvious to you now that that's not something that you would have been able to solve by factoring, but actually not really that difficult to solve by completing the square, right? So this is a nice method to know because it allows you to solve all kinds of equations that you can't factor.